A young girl was left home alone for just a short while, only to vanish without a trace. What followed felt more like the plot of a gripping detective thriller than a harrowing reality. It was simply too shocking to believe that something like this could truly happen. 15 long years would pass before the truth finally emerged, leaving the community reeling in shock and outrage. Jessica Deshan was born on May 2, 1994, in the small, close-knit town of Shepherdsville, Kentucky, a quiet rural place where life was simple and predictable. Most residents were farmers, familiar faces who knew one another well. As the eldest sibling, Jessica took on the role of caretaker for her two younger brothers from a young age, fostering a sense of independence that earned her parents' unwavering trust. At just 15, Jessica secured a part-time job at a local restaurant, fueled by a dream to save for her first car, a red Pontiac. With steadfast determination, she stashed away money over the years, inching closer to making that dream a reality. Balancing work and academics, Jessica thrived in school, setting her sights on attending college to pursue a career in accounting. By fall 2011, at 17, she was stepping into her senior year of high school, brimming with ambition. Around this time, she also began dating, adding to her excitement for the future. But on the morning of Friday, September 10th, Jessica's day began like any other. Her parents left for work while she remained asleep, and her younger brothers boarded the school bus. Jessica planned to drive herself to school later, around noon. When her mother returned home, an unsettling feeling washed over her. Jessica's car remained parked in front of the house, a troubling sign since she should have been in class. With growing concern, she entered the house, checking Jessica's bedroom, hoping to find her simply sleeping in. However, the room was empty. Perhaps she had asked her father for a ride. A quick call confirmed his absence. He had left for work alone that morning. Alarmed, her mother decided to check Jessica's car. Thinking the vehicle might not have started, she grabbed a spare key from inside and stepped outside. But as she approached, a chilling sight halted her in her tracks. The driver's door was slightly ajar, and inside, Jessica's cell phone lay abandoned on the seat. The numbers 9 and 1 flickered beneath the driver's seat, a haunting reminder of a desperate call for help. One of Jessica's shoes and her keys were left behind in the back seat, while her school books, work uniform, and purse remained untouched. The unsettling scene painted a grim picture. It was evident that someone had interrupted her as she tried to summon help. Jessica would never have willingly left her belongings behind. Residing on the outskirts of town, if she had ventured anywhere on foot, she would have faced a long, lonely walk. In a desperate race against time, Jessica's parents dialed the school, only to be met with the shocking revelation that their daughter had never made it to class. The school, failing in its duty to notify them of her absence, left them engulfed in worry. Their fears escalated further when Jessica's best friend from the restaurant called later that day, asking why Jessica hadn't shown up for her shift. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Her absence from both school and work, the abandoned car, and the phone with 911 dialed. It was clear to Jessica's parents that something was terribly wrong. Without hesitation, they reached out to the police for help. However, when they finally connected with the sheriff, their concerns were met with indifference. The sheriff dismissed their fears, suggesting that Jessica had simply wandered off and would return soon, ignoring the glaring evidence that cried out for attention. Among the evidence was a single shoe left behind, a clear indication that she hadn't gone far. Jessica's parents pleaded with the sheriff to take their plight seriously, but he stubbornly refused to initiate an investigation. Heartbroken and frustrated, they returned home, but surrender was not an option. Fueled by a fierce determination to find their daughter, they took matters into their own hands. They reached out to friends, relatives, and anyone who might have seen Jessica, but every inquiry came back empty. Together, they scoured the town, desperately searching for any trace of her, but she was nowhere to be found. The following morning, desperation propelled her parents back to the sheriff's office to report that Jessica had still not come home. This time, the sheriff dispatched 2 officers to inspect her car. However, as her parents soon discovered, the officers conducted their examination without wearing gloves. Carelessly handling the evidence inside the vehicle with their bare hands, they neglected to check Jessica's room, a standard procedure that should have been followed. Once again feeling abandoned by law enforcement, Jessica's parents turned to the local media. hoping to shine a light on their daughter's disappearance and the police's apparent lack of urgency. With the unwavering support of family and friends, they launched their own search efforts, distributing flyers containing crucial information about Jessica. Leading the charge were her father and his brother, Stanley, both familiar with the area and fearing the worst. They decided to concentrate their search near a local river, an area notorious for attracting drug dealers and criminals, hidden amidst its overgrown, secluded landscape. For hours, Jessica's family combed through the rough terrain along the river, yet their search yielded no sign of her. Then, the following morning, an unsettling event transpired. While Jessica's parents remained at home, their son played in the yard. Suddenly, he dashed inside, visibly shaken. He claimed to have heard a cry for help, one that unmistakably sounded like Jessica's voice. Acting on sheer instinct, Jessica's father seized his shotgun and rushed outside, driven by the desperate need to uncover the source of the haunting cry. At that very moment, David Brooks's brother arrived at the scene, joining the frantic search for Jessica Deshan. As they scoured the area, their eyes were drawn to a plume of smoke rising ominously from a neighboring property. The land belonged to the 40-year-old man, David Brooks. As they approached, the sight that greeted them was unsettling. Brooks was burning something that appeared hauntingly similar to clothing. A wave of dread washed over Jessica's father as he moved closer, suspicion mounting. He confronted Brooks, demanding permission to search his property. Brooks's response was curt and dismissive. He flatly refused, ordering them to leave his premises. This encounter marked a chilling turn in the investigation. Before Jessica's disappearance, the Deshan family had maintained a relatively normal relationship with Brooks and his relatives. However, following Jessica's vanishing, Brooks's demeanor shifted dramatically. He began to frequently drive past the Deshan home, his slow, deliberate movements paired with an unsettling smile that seemed to taunt them. It was a behavior that left Jessica's family on edge, further deepening their sense of unease. As if that weren't enough, Jessica's parents began receiving eerie, anonymous phone calls. Each time, the caller remained silent, leaving only the sound of heavy breathing echoing through the line. They suspected Brooks might be behind these chilling calls, but the motive remained a mystery. After witnessing Brooks burning clothes on his property, Jessica's parents, frustrated by the police's lack of interest from the beginning, once again sought help. They urged the officers to search Brooks's property with cadaver dogs, and this time their persistence paid off. The police agreed to act. With Jessica's clothing in hand to guide them, the cadaver dogs were deployed. The investigation team followed the dogs' lead, which took them directly to Brooks's fire pit. But despite their hopes, no solid evidence was uncovered. However, the dogs unearthed a pair of black gloves hidden inside one of Brooks's sheds. The gloves carried a scent associated with decomposition, a discovery that sent alarm bells ringing. Yet, even with these disturbing findings and Brooks's increasingly suspicious behavior, local authorities failed to establish a connection between him and Jessica's disappearance. This inaction left Jessica's parents with an overwhelming sense of frustration and confusion. Driven by desperation, her father made a bold decision. He reached out to the FBI. Typically, the Bureau does not initiate investigations based solely on requests from families of missing persons. However, given the disturbing circumstances surrounding Jessica's case, the FBI agreed to intervene without hesitation. After reviewing the unsettling details provided by her parents, they arrived at a chilling conclusion. Something horrific had likely transpired. From that moment, a genuine investigation commenced, one that was thorough and comprehensive, unlike the efforts of local law enforcement. FBI agents meticulously gathered fingerprints from Jessica's room and vehicle, seizing every piece of potential evidence for forensic analysis. They deployed helicopters and enlisted volunteers for an extensive ground search, leaving no stone unturned. Even the pond near Jessica's home was subjected to meticulous examination as the search for answers intensified. As investigators pondered the grim possibility that Jessica's body might be concealed on the property, the FBI meticulously combed through David Brooks's land with a level of scrutiny that local police had never applied. What they uncovered was alarming. Among the rusting tools and forgotten relics of the sheds, investigators stumbled upon a chilling piece of evidence: a printed photograph of Jessica. This disturbing discovery solidified their suspicions, leading detectives to believe that Brooks was intricately involved in her disappearance. Their focus soon shifted to Brooks's 35-year-old brother, Joseph, whose peculiar behavior during the search raised eyebrows. However, a significant obstacle loomed in their path. Despite the mounting suspicions, the investigation lacked concrete evidence substantial enough to warrant arrests for either of the brothers. With no other leads, authorities intensified their search efforts, convinced that Jessica was no longer alive. Then, on September 27th, 17 harrowing days after Jessica vanished, a call came in that would shift the entire course of the investigation. A woman, driving along a road bordering the river, an area where Jessica's father had desperately searched, noticed something unusual near a tree just off the road. Her curiosity piqued. She ventured closer. As she approached, a horrifying realization struck her. The object before her bore an unsettling resemblance to a human body. Without hesitation, she dialed 911. FBI agents raced to the scene, their worst fears confirmed. Before them lay the lifeless body of a young woman, grotesquely decomposed, missing several fingers and limbs. A rope, stained with red and silver paint, was tightly bound around her legs. The absence of parts of her clothing led investigators to suspect a horrific sexual assault. Due to the advanced decomposition, authorities struggled to confirm whether the body belonged to Jessica. The police visited Jessica's grieving parents, seeking their help in identifying the remains. Overcome with anguish, Jessica's father found himself unable to look, while her mother, summoning every ounce of strength, agreed to approach the scene. At first, she struggled to recognize her daughter amidst the devastation. But then her gaze fell upon something unmistakable, a small butterfly tattoo, identical to Jessica's, perfectly positioned in the same spot. The painful truth became undeniable. Later, forensic experts officially confirmed Jessica's identity and determined that her cause of death was strangulation. The examination revealed multiple bruises, indicating she had endured a brutal attack before her untimely demise. Even more disturbingly, medical experts concluded that her limbs and fingers had been severed post-mortem, suggesting she had been alive during the initial stages of her ordeal. Yet, the most devastating revelation was yet to come. Investigators discovered that Jessica had remained alive for approximately 3 days. In the aftermath of Jessica Deshan's abduction, a haunting truth emerged. Had the police acted with urgency, they might have altered the course of events that led to her tragic fate. Instead, their delay loomed ominously over the grim discovery that awaited them. The FBI, sensing a need for deeper scrutiny, summoned David Brooks for a second interrogation. This time, his narrative took a suspicious twist. In his initial account, he had claimed to have seen Jessica near her home on the morning she vanished. Yet, under the weight of scrutiny, he shifted his story entirely, now insisting that he had not seen her at all that day. He painted a picture of himself at home, nestled in bed with his wife that fateful morning. However, when detectives questioned her separately, her account contradicted his. As the pressure mounted, the FBI pressed Brooks further. They posed a chilling hypothetical. What would he do if his fingerprints were discovered on Jessica's body? His response sent a shiver down their spines. Although no such evidence had been uncovered, Brooks hesitated, then ominously stated that if his fingerprints were found, he would have to confess to everything. The gravity of his admission was not lost on the investigators. Shortly after, Brooks underwent a polygraph test and failed, further intensifying their suspicions. With doubts swirling, the FBI made a daring decision. They arrested Brooks despite the absence of solid physical evidence, fully aware that the trial ahead would be a formidable challenge. Though the circumstantial evidence against Brooks was mounting, it remained insufficient for a definitive conviction. Without concrete proof linking him directly to Jessica's murder, the prospects of securing a guilty verdict were fraught with uncertainty as trial preparations unfolded. As detectives continued their relentless search for additional evidence to fortify the case, they revisited previous findings. A striking detail emerged. During the search of Brooks's car, investigators had uncovered a rope disturbingly similar to the one used to bind Jessica's legs. However, without DNA evidence to corroborate its significance, the rope remained merely another piece of circumstantial evidence, lacking the definitive proof needed to solidify their case against Brooks. The trial finally commenced in January 2015. Brooks's attorney passionately argued that there was no concrete evidence linking his client to the heinous crime, maintaining his innocence amidst the rising tide of accusations. Yet a critical misstep by law enforcement surfaced during the trial proceedings. When investigators initially discovered Jessica's remains, they found several of her missing limbs nearby, contained within specialized boxes. These remains had been entrusted to local police for safekeeping. However, despite clear instructions for refrigeration, the boxes were carelessly left at room temperature. This negligence led to extensive decomposition, obliterating any potential DNA evidence that could have identified the killer. As the trial progressed, the absence of solid forensic evidence and the reliance on weak circumstantial links became painfully evident. Ultimately, the jury found themselves at an impasse, unable to reach a unanimous verdict in a case shrouded in uncertainty and loss. The meticulous crime scene had been compromised, obliterating any potential DNA traces that might have pointed to the killer. Without solid forensic evidence and only flimsy circumstantial links, the case against David Brooks remained precariously weak. In the end, the jury found themselves at an impasse, unable to reach a unanimous verdict. Consequently, David Brooks walked free. Under state law, he could only be charged again if new, irrefutable evidence emerged. For Jessica's parents, the verdict was a devastating blow. In their hearts, they held an unwavering conviction of his guilt. Jessica's family had long held the belief that Brooks was responsible for their daughter's murder. Compounding their pain was the haunting realization that, had the police taken the case more seriously from the outset, Jessica might still be alive today. With justice slipping further from their grasp, their last hope gradually faded into despair. Over the years, Jessica's case lingered in the shadows, nearly forgotten. But in 2012, a new detective, Lynn Hunt, joined the local police force. Assigned to cold cases, she quickly turned her focus to the murder of Jessica Deshan. As she meticulously sifted through the case files, Hunt was appalled by the blatant negligence of her predecessors. The documentation was fraught with errors. Vital conversations with key individuals had gone unrecorded, and the management of evidence was shockingly inadequate. Detective Lynn Hunt recognized that the case had been so poorly handled over the years that she had no option but to restart the investigation from square one, despite the 13 long years that had elapsed since Jessica's tragic murder. Her first course of action was to engage with Jessica's family. One of Jessica's brothers, now an adult and living independently, presented Hunt with a box filled with his sister's belongings, items that had remained untouched since the police had returned them to the family. These belongings had originally been found in Jessica's car, preserved by her brother all these years. As Hunt examined the contents, she felt a renewed wave of frustration at the lack of professionalism displayed in the original investigation. These items, which should have been treated as crucial evidence, were now in a state of neglect. Stored improperly and subjected to the ravages of time, the likelihood of these items yielding any valuable clues was slim. Still, Detective Hunt meticulously scrutinized every piece, driven by an unwavering determination not to overlook a single detail. Amidst her examination, she stumbled upon a surprising document, a copy of David Brooks's medical evaluation. The report revealed an alarming detail. His IQ measured a mere 61, categorizing him as intellectually impaired. This discovery unleashed a torrent of concerns regarding the police's initial handling of his interrogation. Given his cognitive challenges, it was plausible that Brooks had not fully comprehended many of the questions directed at him. What had previously been perceived as suspicious behavior could very well have stemmed from his mental limitations rather than any malice or guilt. This fresh perspective forced Hunt to grapple with a disturbing possibility. Could it be that Brooks was innocent, and the true killer had evaded scrutiny all along? Driven by a relentless quest for the truth, Hunt embarked on a thorough reinvestigation. She diligently reviewed all individuals connected to the case and examined the lives of those who resided in the area at the time of Jessica's disappearance. The investigation into Jessica Deshan's tragic death continued relentlessly, extending into September 2014, nearly 15 years after her murder. It was then that an unexpected lead emerged, one that would reignite the hope of finding justice. A fellow officer from another department reached out to Lieutenant Lynn Hunt with intriguing news. An inmate at a Kentucky state prison had come forward, claiming to possess critical information about the true identity of Jessica Deshan's murderer. Lieutenant Hunt approached this tip with cautious skepticism. Her years of experience had taught her that many inmates fabricate stories, often in hopes of bargaining for reduced sentences. In pursuit of better prison conditions, these leads often turned out to be nothing more than time-wasting dead ends. Yet, she knew that dismissing this information without verification could be a grave mistake. Determined to follow every possible lead, she set out for the prison to meet the informant. Upon arriving, the informant revealed a chilling connection. He had once shared a cell with another inmate, a convict serving time for child abuse, the same crime he himself had committed. Bound by their shared experiences, the two men developed a disturbing friendship, exchanging details about their past crimes. Then, one day, the cellmate made a shocking confession. Among other admissions, he claimed he had murdered Jessica Deshan. The revelation left Lieutenant Hunt utterly stunned. What came next would change the course of the investigation forever. The informant divulged the name of the man responsible for Jessica's death, Stanley Deshan, her uncle, and the brother of her father, James Deshan. According to the inmate, Stanley had confided in him, revealing the horrifying truth. He had been sexually abusing Jessica for years while living under the same roof as her family. He had threatened her repeatedly, warning that if she ever disclosed the abuse, he would kill her or harm someone she loved. By the spring of 2011, Stanley's paranoia had reached a fever pitch. Jessica had started dating someone, and he feared she might finally confess to her boyfriend. Desperate to silence her, Stanley decided to take action. On the morning of September 10th, he arrived at Jessica's home while she was alone. She was outside, preparing to leave, her belongings already packed in her car. Stanley confronted her, demanding she end her relationship immediately. But Jessica refused. She had endured enough, and this time she fought back. In a moment of bravery, she threatened to expose him if he did not leave her alone. Panic surged through Stanley as he realized his world was on the brink of collapse. In a fit of rage, he lashed out, issuing more threats. Jessica, sensing the danger, turned to grab the phone, intending to call 911. Realizing his power was slipping away, Stanley lunged at her. Jessica fought for her freedom, managing to break free and sprint into the house, but he pursued her relentlessly. Once inside, he cornered her in her bedroom, struck her down, and bound her tightly with her own bedsheets. In a horrific turn, he then carried her away to an abandoned shed. This shed was eerily close to where her body would later be discovered. For several agonizing days, Stanley kept Jessica captive, subjecting her to unimaginable abuse and torment. Ultimately, he ended her life, but his cruelty did not cease there. The shed stood ominously, just a short distance from where Jessica Deshan's lifeless body would eventually be discovered. For several agonizing days, her uncle, Stanley Deshan, held Jessica captive, subjecting her to unimaginable abuse and relentless torture. Then, in a heart-wrenching act of cruelty, he ended her life. But his horrific actions did not cease there. In a calculated act of deception, Stanley had moved Jessica's body, placing it in a conspicuous location near the road to ensure it would eventually be found. To further mislead investigators, he gruesomely removed some of Jessica's limbs, attempting to stage her death as the work of drug traffickers. Before fleeing the scene, he buried the bedsheets beneath the shed, erasing the last remnants of his heinous crime. Detective Hunt felt a chill as the informant's details unfolded before her. They were eerily precise. Information had surfaced that had never been disclosed to the public. Only Jessica's closest relatives were aware of the missing limbs. This revelation suggested that the inmate's account could not have been fabricated. In a final twist, he disclosed that Stanley had buried one of Jessica's shoes beneath a broken tree. Near the shed, Lieutenant Lynn Hunt felt she was finally on the verge of proving Stanley Deshan's guilt. Determined to validate the claims made against him, she initiated an independent search, though she found herself hindered by the limited resources of the local police department. With her resources stretched thin, Hunt sought assistance elsewhere. She reached out to Jessica's brother and a few relatives who willingly joined the search. To avoid causing alarm, she refrained from revealing that Stanley was now the primary suspect. In the relentless downpour, the search for concrete evidence began, but the first day yielded nothing. Investigators dug through the areas described by the informant, but their efforts were in vain. As the rain fell, hope began to wane. Hunt, accompanied by Jessica's brother, returned to the site, their determination reignited. As they drove along the road, he pointed out an abandoned barn. Something about it piqued Hunt's curiosity. They parked the car, entered the barn, and began to dig through the soil. Almost immediately, they struck something buried beneath the dirt, a long-awaited breakthrough. It was a bedsheet. Hunt carefully collected the crucial evidence and hurried to Jessica's home. Over the years, Jessica's parents had left her bedroom untouched. It remained a frozen snapshot of the day she vanished. Thanks to the discovery of the bedsheet, Hunt confirmed a critical detail. It matched Jessica's bedding perfectly. It was missing from her bed, and the pattern was identical to the remaining linens. For the first time in 15 long years, the pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place. Then, at last, the truth began to emerge. Following a significant breakthrough, Stanley was arrested and brought in for questioning. Despite his refusal to confess, his demeanor betrayed him. He was visibly shaken as he spoke to the detectives. Eventually, Stanley faced formal charges of murder, and the case proceeded to trial. Jessica's father was left grappling with an unthinkable reality. His own brother had committed an unspeakable crime against his daughter. At first, Jessica's father struggled with denial, unable to accept the grim truth of the situation. But as time passed, he was compelled to confront reality. Reflecting on the past, he recalled moments that now felt painfully suspicious. In the early days of Jessica Deshan's disappearance, it was Stanley Deshan who proposed searching near the river. However, a strange turn of events occurred when Stanley abruptly claimed to feel unwell, prompting his brother to drive him home. This moment unfolded mere yards from the barn where Jessica had been concealed, raising a chilling possibility. Stanley might have intentionally diverted the search efforts away from the truth. He ensured that no one would discover Jessica while she was still alive. As preparations for the trial progressed, Detective Lynn Hunt dug deeper into Stanley's past, determined to uncover more evidence. She was already aware of his previous conviction for assaulting another young girl within the family, but what she discovered next was even more harrowing. A number of women, all closely related to Stanley, bravely came forward to reveal that he had sexually abused them during their childhood. Investigators recognized a disturbing pattern. Stanley would approach his relatives under the pretense of having nowhere to stay, gaining their trust and temporarily moving in. But when left alone with their daughters, he exploited their vulnerability. Using threats to keep his victims silent, it became clear to investigators that Stanley had been preying on young girls within his own family for 3 decades. Despite these revelations, Detective Hunt understood that securing a conviction for Jessica's murder would prove challenging. The case lacked definitive forensic evidence. There were no fingerprints, no DNA, and nothing to physically link Stanley to the crime. With unwavering determination, Detective Hunt meticulously sifted through old case files, searching for anything that could bolster the prosecution's case. It was then that she stumbled upon a shocking revelation. Tucked away in a box of forgotten records, she found a letter dated June 26, 2002. The letter had been penned by a different informant who 12 years prior had reported to the police the very same story that Hunt had recently uncovered from a Kentucky prison inmate. By that time, Stanley was already serving a sentence for assaulting an underage relative. While incarcerated, he had confessed to his cellmate that he was responsible for Jessica's murder. This cellmate, a police informant, had sent a detailed letter to the department handling the case, outlining everything Stanley had disclosed to him.